Guys, here is my video on selective editing in an image. In this case, it's done with the interest of keeping it looking photographic. Well, maybe I'll try two versions. We'll see how long this goes. But the main point of this assignment is to get accustomed to working with selection tools, combining selection tools, seeing the different kinds of adjustments you can make, and so on, right? And I'll just start with that. And so here's my dark smokestack picture shot in Vinegar Hill, a short walk away from school. Kind of nice, and they preserve the cobblestone streets because they're kind of unique anymore. Okay, so here's this photograph, and if you want to see the cobblestone streets, you want to see more of them, right? So it's kind of dark. So, a simple version of showing us more of the details in the shadow area would be to go to an adjustment. So I'm in the adjustment palette right now. Here I am. We got all these icons. So for this, you really want to be able to see adjustments, and you really want to be able to see layers. So I have those two panels open on the right side. And with adjustments open, you've got a bunch of different adjustments that you can make here. You should also know, though, that down at the bottom of the layers palette, if you look at that circle that's half white and half black, right in the middle of those icons down there, that's a text version of the same adjustments. Okay, so your choice, if you like icons or if you like text, it's up to you. One advantage to just working on the layers panel is that you can close that adjustments panel. As you can close and open any of these panels, right? You can click on them and open them or close them, so on and so forth. So I'm in the layers panel without the adjustments panel open. So sometimes these panels can take up a lot of space, especially if you're working on a laptop with a small screen, right? So screen real estate becomes kind of, something to look out for, right? You don't want to use up a bunch of screen space. So you do have these options, these adjustment options, with that black and white circle down at the bottom of the layer palette. But I'm going to click open the icons again. And just to remind you, yeah, you can make a simple adjustment like this. The picture is dark. What do? Oh, I brighten it up, right? Obviously, I hope you run into some problems here, right? So you brighten up the sky, it gets washed out, and then you lose the nice quality of the sky for the interest of trying to pick up more detail in the shadows, right? So let's not do that. I'll zero that out. And what I'll do is go to the Quick Select tool. And now that I'm looking over here in the layers, by the way, I do have a new adjustment layer, right, that just for playing around with that exposure adjustment. I don't want it. I can get rid of it by right-clicking on it and say delete layer, or I can drag that layer and put it in the trash can down at the very bottom of the layer palette, right down there. Okay, so I'm going to go to one of Photoshop's selection tools. Right, the fourth one down is Quick Select. There are two above that, the lasso, and then there's the marquee tool. And as I said, all of these tools have this little white triangle. Most of them do, not all of them. Almost all of them do. And if you click and hold, you'll find out, oh, okay, there are multiple tools nested within that one icon. For this purpose, I'm just going to use the Quick Select tool here. Right, when I click on that, I get the properties for the tool up in the top bar. If you're working in 2018, in the 2019 version, they thought they would update the workspace and get rid of that properties bar, and they'll show you the properties over on the right side in a panel. Personally, maybe it's just out of habit, I like seeing the properties bar for each tool up in the top. It's your choice. If you are like me and you want to see the properties up in the top, you can go up to, I think it's Window, and then they have like classic workspace set up, so it's not here because I'm in 2017 version of Photoshop. But okay, back to the point here. All right, so I'm going to select the blue sky, right? And I'll do it pretty quickly because that's what the Quick Select tool does. And it is very fast, but it's not necessarily accurate, right? It does a pretty good job, but it definitely needs some tuning, right? So you can see my marching ants are, you've got the top of the sky. The marching ants go around that smokestack. They've stopped at this street light and jump across. Right, and they're missing this lower portion of the sky, missing between the building and the smokestack, missing that top right corner, right? So I'm going to zoom in, and you can do that with Command or Control plus key, or you can press the space bar and the Command or Control key, Command if you're on a Mac, and you'll see you get a magnifying glass, right? So here's my magnifying glass. I just click on that and I zoom in. Okay, this is one way to navigate through your picture. Okay. Now another way to navigate through your picture is if you follow me over on the right, here in these palettes over here, I've got a navigator. It looks like the steering wheel for a big ship, right? So if I click on that, I get this window that allows me to zoom in and zoom out. And when I'm zoomed in, I have this red box, and that allows me to move around the picture, right? So for the selection process, it's important that you don't stay out at full view of the picture you're working on. You do want to zoom into details so that you can catch where there are flaws. Okay, so here's my tool. It's a little bit large for what I want to do right now. I want to sneak in between the smokestack and the building. So with my left bracket key, I make it smaller, right? So then it goes right in there. I know that this little corner needs selecting, like that. I'm pressing the space bar, by the way, in order to move around my picture. All right, move, and then there's this whole area down here that Photoshop has decided not to select. It just makes this jump from the street light over to the smokestack. And once I click in that area, it recognizes, oh, you actually want that whole bluish area, right? And unfortunately, it jumps over the street light, right? So it still hasn't selected some areas, like here underneath the water tower. So I'm going to make my tool smaller, left bracket key, and click in there. See if Photoshop figures it out. They didn't quite. Come in here again. And if I wanted to take my time, I'm not going to if it's demo, I would probably be careful about the selection of the legs on this water tower, right? So they're not selected. The point is to just get the sky, right? So just checking out the edge of the building to see how well it's done there. There are some problems down at the bottom of the sky here. I'm going to come back to that maybe a little bit later. But the bottom portion of the picture is not selected, right? I'm going to go to full view, fitting the image into the window. That's Command 0 or Control 0. All right, just so you can see, it's the top portion of the picture that's selected now, not the bottom portion, right? So now we've got this problem with this street light, right? It's not selected. I want to make it selected, right? And maybe with my quick select tool zoomed in like this, I could ask Photoshop to reconsider that street light and say, hey, look, we want the sky selected, but we don't want this selected, Photoshop, and you've gone and selected it. So if I press my Option key, right, it makes my selection tool into a deselect tool. So I can come in here and say, hey, Photoshop, deselect this street light and see how it does. And it does pretty good, really, right? So I can have it deselect here, right? Photoshop figures it out a little bit. It's a little bit rough right along the bottom there. It's not really following that edge very well, and you can correct that easily. So zoomed in, and with a smaller quick select tool, I can probably come in here and get that selected, right? No problem. But for the purposes of showing you that you have multiple tools available to you, I'm going to switch over to the lasso tool, which is right up above that, up above the quick select tool. And within that, nested, you've got the freehand lasso, which you can just draw any kind of shape, polygonal lasso, lasso, which allows you to draw rectilinear lines, straight lines, and magnetic lasso. So lasso asks Photoshop to find that edge between these two colors or these two blocks of light and dark and select along that line. Okay, because the street light is pretty straight, I'm going to use the polygonal lasso tool. I'm looking up at my properties bar, right, and it's feathering 5 pixels, right? You really don't want to feather too much. You could feather a few pixels. There are some problems with feathering, and there's some advantages for feathering. Depending on what kind of image you're working on and what you're doing with the selection, feathering is problematic a little bit, right? So I'm going to let it go with 0 feathering. So I go feather 0, 0 pixels of feathering. So now I'm going to add 2, or let's see, I'm going to subtract from this selection on here, right? So the sky is selected, the street light is selected, right? And I want to deselect, right? So if I press the Option key, I get a minus next to my cursor, right? That means deselect, not select. So I'm going to add, or I'm going to subtract away from the sky and add to this deselected area. So I'm clicking inside the previously deselected light post here. I'm clicking in here, and then I'm going to go find this line, and I'll look at it fairly closely. There's a little bit of tapering going on, and there's a little bit of there are like some joints in the pipe there. It's not just one straight pipe, right? So come up and I just bump around here. Every time I'm clicking, you can hear me clicking, right? I'm dropping an anchor point for this selection, right? And that's necessary with this tool. With the magnetic lasso, on the other hand, Photoshop drops anchor points as you trace around a line, right? So let this go. And there's a bit of a problem with using this polygonal lasso tool on something that's curved like that light. And I can, because the light itself is a curved surface, and I'm dropping straight lines. Probably won't be too visible in reality, but it's something to be aware of. And I can tell that I just dropped an anchor point a little too far inside of this street light, right? So you can back up by pressing delete. So if I mistakenly go like bump, 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 and I'm like, whoa, what was I doing? Delete, 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 and I'm back to here, right? Bonk, bonk, bonk. Okay. There's that little joint right there. Okay, so then once I'm inside of this previously deselected area, I can go to where I began. You'll see this little circle open up next to the tool. Bonk, right? So I'll zoom out, Command minus. Right, so now I just have the sky selected, not the street light, right? And let me just zoom in a little bit. Let's see, how did it do along the smokestack? There's some irregularities, like in here, and I can press the space bar and look up here. It's okay. It's good enough for what we're doing. Right? There is a problem down here, though, where we have the marching ants crawling along branches of the tree here. I don't want to take the selection down all the way to one skyline, one set of buildings or the other, either the very light ones or the ones closer than that, right? So I can use quick select here, and so I'll go back to that. That's W, by the way, for wand, right? And I'm going to add to this selection by coming in here, moving my tool around. hoping that Photoshop gets what I'm going for. Right, here, right up here. Right, you can see it's still a little bit kind of in a sense distracted by the trees and stuff like that. Okay, good enough. All right, so just for you to be aware of this, I could go further with my magic wand and drag down in here and pretty much get where I'm going, what I want to go for. But for the purposes of showing you another tool, I'm going to switch over to quick mask mode, right? So it can be a little bit confusing because there is the quick select tool and then there's quick mask mode, right? So quick mask mode, you get to that by pressing the Q key, right? Q in your keyboard. And now we're in quick mask mode, right? And by default, it shows you this red, pink color that is where the picture or the effect actually that we're going to be applying later will be masked out. So the red is showing you what's not affected. What is not red is the area that is selected, right? And you can change that color if you want to. Sometimes it's necessary. If you're working on something that is red and you have the red mask, it's like, hey, I can't see red from red. The way you change the color is you go to channels. So I'm over on channels on the right side, right? Channels should be there next to layers. That's the way it shows. And you'll see I've got RGB. We're working in the color mode RGB. That's red, green, blue, and all three channels are turned on. And then we have this new channel here called Quick Mask. Right? If you double click on Quick Mask, you get this, and it allows me to say, hey, I double click on the color, and I'm like, hey, in this instance, green works better, or blue works better, or whatever the color might be. You want a contrasting color with the image you're working on. Honestly, for our purposes, the red works just fine. So I can just say cancel. Another thing you can do is change the opacity of the mask. We're calling the red area the mask. Okay. Sometimes you need to see through it a little bit better because these subtleties in the image you're working on are too subtle, or it's too dark, and you want to be able to see through the mask a little bit more. So this is where you change the opacity of the mask. Okay. You can also reverse what is color indicated, right? So now, right now, by default, it's the masked areas that are shown as red. If I want to show the selected areas, I can reverse it just by clicking there. But I'm good with the way it is. Okay. So when you're in quick mask mode, you can use another drawing tool to add masking or remove masking. And now you can do it with the brush. Right, so with the brush, here's the brush. The brush is, it's about a quarter, a third of the way down on the toolbar. Right, here's the toolbar, here's the brush. You can see the brush is huge, right? Up in the top properties bar, you can see that, here, I've got all these various brushes. It's amazing. You don't want all those kinds of brushes. You really just want a basic round brush. And again, I would go for something that is hard, meaning very little feathering, if any. And that brush is way too big. I'm going to make it smaller. And I'll click off of here to close that window. Other things for you to be concerned about, or you should look at, is especially when you're working in a collaborative environment, like other people are using your computer, but even for yourself, there are other things in the properties bar you want to be sure are set up for this purpose, right? For this purpose that I'm about to demonstrate, make sure that the mode is on normal. That's the blend mode between layers. You have a bunch of different choices, but for this you just want normal. Make sure, in this case, opacity is at 100%, right? Make sure that you don't have your workspace set up for a stylus, unless you're using a stylus that has pressure sensitivity, right? We don't want that right now. And my flow, right next to that, I don't know what I was doing, but in my case, the flow is down to 28%, right? That's really going to limit the effectiveness of my brush. I'm going to bump that up to 100%. Okay. Lastly, down at the bottom of the toolbar, right here, there are two swatches, foreground and background swatch. You want to make sure that those are black and white. The way to do that is to press the D key, right? And it's a good thing to do that just to, even if it looks like it's black and white, if you want to be sure that black truly is 000 for red, green, and blue, and white is 255, 255, 255, 255, maxed out, that's white. Press the D key, that gives you black and white. When black is in the foreground swatch, I'll demonstrate this, you make a mark, right? I'm basically increasing the area that's masked in the picture. You know, just violating what my ultimate goal is, but just to show you that. Obviously that is not what I'm going for, I hope it's obvious. Command Z backs up, right? If I press the X key, it's the same as clicking on this double arrow. X key switches back and forth between white and black. It'll put white in the foreground swatch or black in the foreground swatch, right? And if I'm trying to remove mask, like I want to do down here, I want white in the foreground. So white's in the foreground. I need my brush to be smaller, left bracket, right? And then I just come in here and I'm basically erasing mask, right? And because the building here, those buildings in the distance, the difference in color and the difference in value, light and darkness, is not very great. Sometimes Photoshop has a hard time picking up that that's what you're actually going for. Right? I'm not sure that this is actually the best tool to use for this, cleaning up right down here, but I did want to make sure that you know how to use quick mask mode. Right? So I'm choosing to deselect the distant buildings, or actually I'm selecting them, but I'm removing the mask around them. All right, I'm going to clean up this corner, right? And I'll make that corner even better. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here a little bit more like this. Right, and if I reverse my swatches, go put black in the foreground, then I can come down and go clean up this corner like so. Right, clean up that edge like so. Come in here, just grab that building there a little bit. Come in here, get that little detail, blah, 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 like this. Clean this up, okay? Okay, and there are other areas that I could go on and deal with, you know, like this, that needs a little bit of cleaning up, and so on. I could deal with these guys, these legs a little bit better, so on. And I encourage you to do that, right? Here's a little mistake on the smokestack. Would be easy to clean that up, right? And, you know, I could go on a bit further, but I'm making the case for using quick mask mode. So once you're done with that, you know, painting in, painting out mask, press the Q key once again, and you're back to the marching ants. Right, there they are. I'll zoom out to see the full picture. That's Command 0. Right, and now I just have the sky selected, and I can do any number of things. Right, I can saturate the color. Go to my adjustments. I can go here. Here's saturation. I can boost up the saturation. And by the way, I can select just blue. And I can say I just want to saturate blues in a picture. Right. I can change the color of that blue. Saturation is the middle slider. The next one up is hue. And I could move this around like mad. Wow, you know. And you know, and it looks interesting. Looks cool. But your assignment is 3 pictures that pretty much hone to photographic believability, but look different than the original in at least 3 different areas of the picture. Then you do have these 2 images, 2 out of 5, where you can go crazy. But let me go with this hue, and I'll just zero out so we're back to just the increased saturation. And just to point out, when you have your cursor highlighting that box, or you have a cursor blinking in the box, in this case for hue, you can use your up and down arrow keys to slightly modify that color, as opposed to going radical with it like I did before, just to, show you that it really did have an effect, right? So I'm being more gentle about that effect, okay? All right, so now let's say I love the sky. I'm going to leave the sky the way it is. Back to my layer palette down here, right? So I have this hue saturation adjustment layer right there. It has a layer mask. That's the black and white image or thumbnail that you see in that layer. Layer masks are your friend. They're really great. They do lots of good things. They allow you to just affect one part of a picture as opposed to all of the picture. They also allow you to bring back the selection that you used to make that mask with, right? So if you press the Command key on a Mac, Control on a PC, you bring back the marching ants, right? By the way, if you've spent a good length of time making a selection, and I work on complicated images a lot, and I want to make sure that I do not lose the selection, I can save the selection, right? I can go up to Select in the very top menu bar and say Select, Save Selection, and I can call it Sky, right? So it's a little bit slow right now. Come on, Save Selection, right? Name it Sky, right? And it says in the panel below, Operation, New Channel. I say, okay, what does it mean? If I go over to my channels, plural, palette, I've got, here's my sky selection. So anytime I want to come back, and say I've gotten rid of a layer mask and by mistake, and then I realize, hey, I really need that, I've got that selection sitting in here, and I can bring the selection back by pressing the Command or Control key and clicking on that thumbnail. It's really helpful. Okay. All right, I'm going to invert the selection so that instead of the sky being selected, it's the ground and the buildings. Two ways to do that. You can go up to Select, Inverse, or use the keystroke, right? Command Shift I, right? Command Shift I. Okay, now you'll see that the marching ants go down along the bottom of the picture. It's selecting the bottom, not the top, right? Now we agree, I think we all agree, right? It's a little bit dark on the bottom, right? Easy way to solve that is to go to Adjustments, bump up the exposure a little bit, right? And exposure is kind of limited in your ability to zero in on different parts of the picture, right? Another helpful way to deal with exposure is to go to Levels. Levels are here. It's the second icon, top row, second from the left. I'll click on Levels. Okay, here I am, Levels. Then in the levels, you see this thing called a histogram, right? This graph that's up in the top right. On the left side of that graph is the black point. On the very right side is the white point in the picture, right? In the middle, and you see a slider at the black point, right? And you see a slider at the white point, right? And the middle is midtones, right? So I can move the midtones around, while basically not changing the white point, not changing the black point, just working on the midtones. Right? Now, as I do that, you can see it's affecting the whole picture, right? Because adjustments are, unless they become a clipping layer, they're going to affect everything below it, right? So how do I have this, how do I change this layer so it's only affecting the buildings, the street? If you look in the bottom of this panel, you'll see several buttons here, icons. There's a trash can. You can do away with that adjustment. Here's an eyeball. You can turn it on and off. You can revert back to where you started, right? and you can go back one previous step. The next one over, though, if you hover over that, it'll tell you you're making a clipping layer. This adjustment affects all layers below. I'm going to turn that on, right? So now it's a clipping layer, and it only affects, it's basically assuming the properties of the mask, in this case, just below it. Right? So here's the mask, it's masking out the sky. Now, with the levels layer, even though there isn't a mask in there, you can see it's a white rectangle. There's no mask in there. It adopts the masking in the layer below it, right? So now if I take that mid-tone slider, I can brighten it up, I can darken it down. It's not affecting the sky. It's leaving the white point where I want it. Right? Like that. Okay, there are more complex ways of adjusting exposure in an area like that. Right? I'm going to leave it that way for now. But let's say, just for the sake of, there is an experimental part for this assignment, so a place for you to have fun. So I'm going to go to my adjustments palette, and you do have some stuff here, like threshold, like posterize, like invert. Like I go like invert, and whoa, right? That's pretty cool. If I make it a clipping layer, right, it's just the sky's back to where it was, right? But obviously the foreground's gone kind of crazy. I can reduce the impact of that inversion by taking opacity and saying, whoa, hold on there, and reduce that. Doesn't look so great with inversion, but I can also change the blend mode from normal to darken. Now I get some weirdness in the smokestack. I can change it to overlay. I get something like that. Right. The effect that you'll have with these blend modes really depends on the pictures, the layers that you're asking Photoshop to blend. Right. So you kind of have to go through them to see what the effect will ultimately be. I'm going to turn off that inversion with the eyeball right there in the layer palette. Okay, so you've got 3 pictures to do that are altered in 3 different areas of the picture, right? At least. And the more the merrier. This is all about getting practice with selection tools and that kind of thing. So do at least 3 selections and change the color, change the contrast, change the exposure, so on and so forth, right? 3 of them that look kind of photographic, right? And then 2 of them that look like, you know, surreal, otherworldly. You know, you've broken from the photographic tradition. Okay, so you've got all that done. If you don't recall how to make you can say goodbye now if you want, but I'm going to do a quick screenshot because some people are asking about screenshots, how do you make a screenshot. On a Mac, it's Command-Shift-4, the number 4, and I get a cursor that is like a bullseye kind of thing, and I just drag this so that it incorporates some of the picture and incorporates my adjustment layers over there, and I release, and it'll save a picture to the desktop, right? For PC, it is Alt Print Screen, and actually it turns out that the lab at school, even though you're on an iMac, that keyboard is a PC iMac. It's a PC iMac, and you'll see a print screen. I think it's the number 12 in the top of the keyboard. Some of the keyboards are Mac, some of the keyboards are PC. So, okay, save your file as a project file. So I'm going to go Command-Shift-S to save as, and I'll call this smokestack hyphen project, right? So that I know that's the file with the layers in it. Layers, bottom left-hand corner, you see layers are checked, alpha channels are checked. I can turn them off if I want a PSD file without the layers, but I'm going to keep this master file with the layers. I say a project file with the layers. So now I've got that project file, and I'll make a JPEG. So again, save as, that's Command or Control-Shift-S. And instead of a Photoshop file, I'll make a JPEG file. The JPEG file does not save layers, does not save alpha channels, right? So then I take the PROJ off of it, And I might call this flat. I might just let it go as JPEG. I'll let it go as JPEG, just like this. And I'll say save. Okay. I'll give it a quality of anywhere from 9 to maxed out at 12 is good. I'll just let it go at 9. Right. So now I've got a JPEG of that file, and I have the project file. Keep your project files. Upload the screenshot, upload the JPEG. All right? Okay, signing off. See ya.